All right. Hi, welcome back. I was asked in the recess, those of you who are interested in Norwegian translations using a headset, these are in the back, so you can go and grab a headset if needed. All right. So those who were in my previous presentation, those who are just joining, welcome again. And this will be a little bit after we've done through the basics and we explained how things are going behind the scenes, how are the DNA matches calculated, the ethnicity estimate. I want to take a deep dive and go over the product. I'm Rand Sneer, the product manager for DNA at MyHeritage, for those who didn't meet me yet. And we're going to go over the advanced features. Hopefully I'll be able to share with you some useful tools that you can use in your research. So we'll talk mostly about the DNA matches list and the review DNA match page. Then I'll talk a little bit about the Chromosome browser. And I'll end with a personal story that hopefully we'll be able to group all these things together and end with a smile. All right. So DNA matches. Maybe too tiny to read, but the idea is there. You got your results. You've waited a long time, and your DNA results are ready. And you're usually immediately jumping to look at your DNA matches list to see who are those relatives that we were able to find for you in our database. So here's our DNA match looks like. This is Elon. He's my cousin from my maternal side. And let's see a little bit what we present here on the card for you to see and use. So on the top left, we give you a name, a known relationship, if it exists in the tree. So Elon is in my tree, so I can show that. His age, and where he's from. That's useful. I use it quite often, especially where the country where they're from, because if there's a specific side of the family I want to investigate or want to research, so that's very useful. We'll get to it later, you can filter your matches by where they are from in the world, and you can start by looking at them. We're showing you an indication if this is a new match that was recently added. When you test your DNA, you get your first X amount of results, but people are testing all the time. So it's a never-ending journey. Every day you'll be getting new DNA matches and your list will grow. So we're adding that new indication to help you distinguish the new ones. On the top left, we're giving you an estimated relationship range. In this case, we're telling you that it's a first cousin because we know it. So we're telling you the estimated relationship of you and your DNA match, and sometimes it will be a range, and sometimes it'll be just a couple of options. In this case, we know the relationship, so we're showing that it's your first cousin. And below there, we're giving you some DNA match information, such as what's the amount of shared DNA that you have, how many segments, and what is the longest segment that you share. Now, if we give you a range, and even if we don't, because with Elon, for example, I share 12% of shared DNA, we added a little bubble right there next to the question mark, next to the estimated relationship. So when you click on it, a little chart will open up showing you exactly where this relationship what kind of relationship that can be to you, and where they are located away from you on a family tree. So I also recommend you to click that. And it's different. Every different match will show you different possibilities, different range of relationships. So the chart will color only those relevant parts. On the right side, we're adding the genealogical information. If you and the other side have a tree, we'll present that information right there. So if it's too tiny, I'll just read it out loud. I can tell on Elon that he appears in a family tree with about 865 people, who it's managed by. I'm telling you also that you have shared surnames in your tree, in my tree in this case, in Elon's tree. Now, having a shared surname is something that can strengthen my belief or my understanding that there probably is a relationship or a connection. Depends on how common your last name is. But if there are shared surnames, that's something that's definitely worth looking into. We're also telling you the third thing is that we're telling you that you have smart matches if they exist between your tree and the other side. Smart matches are individuals that exist in one tree and exist in someone else's tree. So even if these are we weren't able to find a direct common ancestor or a blood related, but we were able to find a person that matches by the name or date of birth or some other parameters that we take into consideration. Having a smart match with someone with one of your DNA matches is definitely something that's worth looking into. On the top right, there's an option to add a note. As you go with your DNA research and you go over your DNA matches and you figure things out, you learn more things along the way. So we've added the notes option right there, which you can always open from this page and from the other one, and you can put in some information that you can go back to later on and refer to every time you discover something new about your DNA match. So these are editable as well. On the DNA match page itself, there are a couple of things that I wanted to share and talk about that could be very useful when working with your list of DNA matches. And the first one are the filters. So there are 4 family of filters at MyHeritage as of date. The first one on the left are the tree details, which are basically can narrow down your list of DNA matches, your filter, your list of DNA matches by the 3 criteria we spoke about earlier. So having those with a family tree, those who have shared surnames, and those with whom you have a smart match. So if you're starting your research, you have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands sometimes of DNA matches, and you're not really sure how to start, I would definitely use those filters and go with that and start and see those for who I have like a shared surname that's worth looking into, or those who have individuals in their tree that are similar to the ones that exist in my tree. We also help you break it down by different relationship types. So we have 3 that we decided at MyHeritage. The first one are the close family, which is up to a first cousin, and the extended family, which are up to 4th cousins, and the distant relatives who are 4th cousins and more. We're looking at the estimated relationship that we found for these DNA matches, and we just group them together so it's easier for you to work with. So if you're done working on your close family, you can move next to your extended family, for example. The locations. Filtering by location. We provide the option to filter your DNA matches by the country where they're from. So that's very useful. For example, for a long time I was researching my roots in Bulgaria, and I was able to, I used this tool to filter my list and see only the DNA matches who are currently living in Bulgaria, and I started working on that, was able to break some brick walls there. And the last one are the ethnicity results. The ethnicity results of your DNA matches. So let's say that you have, in my case, I have Ashkenazi Jewish and I have some Iberian. And I was quite surprised with my Iberian roots, and I wanted to research that a bit. So I filtered my DNA matches list by those who have also Iberian roots, and I was able to look at their family trees and look for shared surnames, and that was very helpful for me when doing my research. One more thing I want to mention on this page are the option to sort the list. So we give a couple of options. The list is usually sorted by default by the amount of shared DNA, so you'll get your closest matches will appear first. But you can also share it by the one with whom you have the largest segment, or by name, or by most recent, if you're working with your list and want to see who was added latest to your list of DNA matches. You can search your list of DNA matches, and we give 2 options. You type in a string, you type in text, and we'll look for that string, that part in the name of your DNA match. But we're also looking in some ancestral surnames that exist in trees of your DNA matches. So for a while I was searching my Bloom family, so I typed in Bloom, and all of the DNA matches with Bloom in their ancestral surnames came back. So that was very useful because I was able to look at them. All right. So that was the basic of what we show on the DNA match card. And once you think you're ready, you found that candidate you want to look at now, you want to continue your research, let's see what the Review DNA Match page offers us. And that is definitely too tiny, but we'll go into each one of them separately. So the first are the smart matches. So now I'm looking at Tomer, my cousin, and I'm looking at smart matches, individuals that exist in my tree and in his tree. I'm choosing specifically example from my family to keep the privacy of my DNA matches, but everything I'm showing here is also relevant for any of the DNA matches that you have, assuming we were able to identify smart matches or shared surnames. But Tomer is a good example because we have at least one similar ancestral line, so we can show different examples of all of the components and how to use them. So I can see two individuals that exist in my tree and two individuals that exist in his, and then that can help me. That definitely means something on my DNA match, on Tomer in this case. The shared ancestral surnames, as we explained before, we're showing individuals from my tree and from his tree that have the same surname in their trees. Their ancestrals are bearing the same surnames. Now, what we see here, we see these individuals, and let's assume I didn't know who Tomer was, okay? I'm familiar with Tomer. I've known him since I was very young. But let's assume Tomer took a DNA test, and his results are now online on MyHeritage. If he started building his tree, and I can see all these blooms, and I can see here some blooms, I know that that is my maternal side. So I'm better able to see how me and Tomer are related. So the shared surnames are definitely very helpful. And a new feature that we launched yesterday, and it's available for, we're gradually opening it up, so it'll take us a couple of days to get there. But what we are adding as of yesterday, actually, to the product are the ancestral places, and Gilad spoke about them earlier in his presentation. And we took it a step further. Okay, so we already offer you the option when there are shared surnames to match them between one and the other. If we find the shared surnames, we'll show it to you. But in many cases, some people get to a certain degree of relationship in their tree and they stop. Some people know up till their grandparents and that's it. Some people know one level up. But we're looking not only at the surnames, we're also looking at the places that they put in their trees for birth and death. And that is interesting because in some of the cases, there won't be a shared surname, right? The shared surname was from the maternal side, 4 generations up, and my DNA match didn't even knew that he or she existed. But he did know that he has some roots in Bulgaria. Again, I'm getting back to my personal example. So what we'll see with this feature, we'll show you different countries and US states. That's the level that we define as a shared place. And we'll try to see if there's an ancestral event that exists in your tree in that place, and that same place is mentioned in the tree of the other person. And we'll show it to you on a map, and we'll list the individuals that have those places added to their individual cards on MyHeritage, to the trees. So in this example here, me and Tomer, we have 5 different countries that we have ancestral events from. That's amazing. And we can see that in Bulgaria, the purple pin represents an exact city in which we have events. So my grandmother, Charlotte, she was born in Sofia, Bulgaria, the capital of Bulgaria, Sofia. And she's his grandmother as well. So we can see that both of us have an exact event in the same city of Bulgaria. Same thing goes to Varna up there in the east. But I wanted to show you another example. So this is when you have a shared event, and that's great. If we were able to narrow it down to a city level and say both of you have events in Oslo, Norway, that's great. But sometimes there won't be a specific city or the user didn't even log it. He didn't put it in. When I started my tree, I just put Bulgaria. I didn't think of adding Sofia, and that happens to a lot of users. So we're handling that case as well. And you can see here when I changed from my list at the bottom left, top left there, I switched to Russia. Here I can see 2 types of pins. So the purple pin represents events in a city that both exist in my tree and in Tomer's, in my cousin's tree. But there's a gray pin, and the gray pin represents an event that happened it's logged. There's a city in my tree that doesn't exist in his. In this case, it's Chelyabinsk in Russia. And I list the individual right there. That's Paul Milman. That's my grandfather from my paternal side. So that's the reason why there's no event on his. So we can look at those events and we can match those and see whether there are specific cities that we were able to narrow down, or if there are even countries or US states from where we have events, shared or not shared. All right. The next component is the shared DNA matches, the next feature, and that is very useful for many of our users. The shared DNA matches are people in our database that both I match with and the DNA match that I'm currently looking at is matching with. So there are 3 people, and I'm matching with A is matching with B, and C is matching with B. And when I'm looking at Tomer, for example, and again, let's assume I didn't know who Tomer was. It was a new DNA match on MyHeritage. I can see there, you're not familiar with my family tree, that is fine. But at the top there is my mother, and right below her is her sister. So I don't see anyone from my paternal side, which kind of tells me that Tomer is from my maternal side. What we've added recently at the right is a little icon that tells you in case there are triangulation segments for those group of 3 people, and we'll get to triangulation in a couple of slides, so just bear with me. We're showing a pedigree chart for you and for the DNA person. Now it's important to say, we're showing the information that we can. If the user filled it up, if he created a family tree, if he added individuals, if he tagged places, etc. So if that information is available, we'll present it, but obviously if it doesn't, we won't. So there's a pedigree chart, and you can have a glimpse of the tree of that person. We're showing you shared ethnicities. This can also come into play if I know how my roots are divided. I know that my father is Scandinavian, and I know that my mother is Iberian. So if I'm matching with someone, and I see that he is Iberian in his ethnicity, it probably means that it's from my maternal side. And if I know about my grandparents, even better. And at the bottom of the page, we're showing you the chromosome browser, which lists the segments and their locations, those shared segments marked with purple, who are identical to you and the DNA match. All right? And we'll jump right into the chromosome browser now and talk about triangulation and other cool stuff. So this is a shared segment. If you were in my previous presentation, and even if you weren't, it won't be too difficult to explain, I hope. We were able to find, we're looking at the chromosomes, we're looking at the pairs of chromosomes, and we're trying to look for a segment that's long enough, according to our thresholds, to determine that there's a certain match. There's a segment that we consider it to be an inherited by descent, coming from its common ancestor, and we tag it, and that is one of your shared segments, and we determine its size. That's what you see on the chromosome browser. We're just showing you the places and the spots on the chromosomes and the lengths. If you hover over each one of those purple bars, you'll see a little bit of information, like what is the position and what is the length of that segment. And that will be useful when trying to do triangulation. Triangulated segments are shared DNA segments between 3 or more individuals. So let's assume, for example, that I tested and my mother tested, and her mother was tested, my grandmother. So all of us have a common shared ancestor, and that is my grandmother in this case. We're all related through her. And there'll be both, I will match with my mom and with my grandma will match with my mom, and we're all matching one another, and there are segments on the chromosome which are identical to all of us. And that helps us understand better that there are common ancestors. And I'll show you an example with this little tree here that I hope that you can see. The names are less relevant. The idea is the one that's more important of how it works. So we have 4 people who have tested their DNA, okay? Carol, Alice, Bob, and David. But when we're looking at triangulated groups, or like trying to look for common ancestors for the 4 of them, there are no common ancestors for all of them. There are actually 2 groups here. The one on the left of Carol, Alice, and Bob, their most recent common ancestors are William and Xandra. And there's another group on the right of Alice, Bob, and David, where the common ancestors are Eve and Zelda, different people. So they exist in the same family tree, but their common ancestors are not the same. And we're able to find here 3 triangulated groups of people that share. Now let's take me as an example and see how I work with the chromosome browser and how it helps me with my research. So this is the main page. That's me at the top, my DNA matches at the bottom, and I can choose which one of them to pull into the bank and see whether we are sharing same segments or not. Meaning all of us have a segment that was inherited by the same common ancestor. We allow up to 7 DNA matches to be added today for comparison. So I started by taking my dad and his mom, all right? And I compared them. And when I compared them, I saw little bubble indications right there on the chromosomes that show each color here represents a segment with a DNA match, so you can get up to 7 bars, and each one will get a different color. So we can see that I have a triangulated segment over there, on the second, on the third, on the first. These are very close relatives, so it's an easy example just to explain the logic behind it. And we're showing you that you have a triangulated segment and the position and the length. And that's also mentioned right there at the top, how many triangulated segments you found. We found for you, for those group of people that you've added all together. The rule is like this. They all need to match one another, and they all need to have at least one segment that's identical to all of them. All right? So if you had one that's outside of the family, if we'll go back for a second, and if I would have taken Carol and Alice and Bob and put them on the chromosome browser, I would have seen some triangulation, hopefully. If I would have added David, it would have told me that there are no triangulated segments because David is breaking that logic, right? There are no shared common ancestors for the 4 of them. And let's see how I work with the new match that I get. So I got a new match with Jackie. Okay? That's cool. So I took my grandma, Rachel, and I put them all in the chromosome browser. And it told me that there are no triangulated segments between me and Jackie. Now you see that there are 2 colors that it appears as if there are. Because they're standing right in the same location. One is red and one is orange. But still we told you that there are no triangulated segments. And the reason that this can sometimes happen is that because we have pairs of chromosomes. One from the father and one from the mother. So I hope it can be seen on the screen. But what might have happened here is that I'm sharing with Rachel one of the pairs, and I'm sharing with Jackie the second pair. But Rachel and Jackie are not sharing anything with one another. So there is no common ancestor right here. I might be related to the 2 of them, but from different lines. All right? The best example is when you take 2 parents with you, and you try to triangulate. So it looks as if we're sharing the entire genome, right? We have colors all over the place. But the real thing that happens here is that one pair is from my paternal side and the other one is from my maternal side. And they're not matching each other, hopefully. Right. All right. Let's see how I worked with Gene. So Gene was a new match, and he didn't have a tree. I contacted him. He didn't respond. So I used the chromosome browser, and I took my mom. I tested my mom. I tested my dad. I tested a bunch of my family already. So I started with my mom. No specific reason why. So I put my mom and I put Gene. And it told me that there are no triangulated segments. All right. So it's not mom. Let's take dad. So I put dad. I put my father and I put Gene. And then it told me that I have 7 triangulated segments. That's great. So I'm matching Gene, and my father is matching Gene, and we have a lot of segments in common, and there was a lot of shared DNA. So hey, good. I'm keeping on with dad. And I'm climbing up the tree. My grandfather, I didn't have a chance to meet him, unfortunately. He passed, my grandfather, he passed way before I was born. But my grandmother lives, and I tested her. And I took her and Gene, and I put them on the chromosome. And again, there were no triangulated segments. So he's matching my dad, he's not matching my mom, but he's not matching my grandmother from the paternal side, which kind of leaves me with my grandfather. And we'll close with this case for now, but it kind of was an attempt to show you how I work with the chromosome browser and how I use the different people with who I've tested in my family to kind of get that, kind of be able to rule out options and further my research. We'll end, it'll take about 10 to 15 minutes, but I hope you like it, with the curious case of Edie Julik. It's a personal story of mine, so I hadn't got permission from everyone involved to tell it. And let's go. On Sunday, January 28th, I received an email from MyHeritage that told me that a new DNA match was found. We send our users on weekly basis emails telling them that new DNA matches were found. And this one caught my eye especially. I hope you can see it. It says that I have 1.8% of shared DNA across 133 centimorgans, and that she could be my first cousin twice removed to second cousin twice removed, and that's close. I'm not familiar with Edie Julik. I'm not familiar with the surname of Julik. Never heard it until that day. So that caught my eye. So I looked further. And this is my brother Shai. And he also matched, obviously. We're brothers. We should be matching. Most of our DNA matches should be mutual. So he also matched with her with 3.3%. And this is something, if you get a 3.3%, you keep on investigating. Bless you. All right. And now the relationship estimate even narrowed down. Now it's a first cousin once removed to a second cousin once removed because Shai has too much of shared DNA for it to be those more distant relationships that I got. So this is like kind of a quick example of why testing siblings can also be very useful. I'm moving forward. So I went to MyHeritage. I went to the website. And Edie didn't have a tree. That sucks. But because there's nothing I can work with. I mean, there are some things I can work with, and I'll show you in a second, but I won't see any shared surnames. We were kind of already developing, like in very initial phases, the shared places I showed you, so I would have been able to look at them, but there was none. There's nothing. No surnames, no smart matches. Just me and my match. So I used what I could, and I went to the shared DNA matches. And on the shared DNA matches, I saw my mother, Noga, at the top, and her sister, Iris, at the bottom. I didn't see anyone from my paternal side, and I've tested a lot of people from my paternal side. The ones at the middle are my daughter and my brother, Shai, who you saw before. Now, when I looked at the percentage that they share with Edie, it was very high. Iris shared 6.2%. That's very close. That's a second cousin. And I'm not familiar with any Juliks. So I continued. I tried using the shared ethnicities, but an honest confess, I'm Ashkenazi from both sides. So I couldn't really tell. I could tell that Edie is Jewish Ashkenazi as well in high percentages, but it didn't really help me because all my grandparents are Ashkenazi Jewish. So I'm stuck. I know I have a very good DNA match. I don't know who she is, but there's something that's worth looking into. The names are less relevant, and there's no other way to show a tree in this size in a better resolution. This is me, and Edie is matching me. And that is my brother Shai on the right, and she's matching him. And they're matching my mom and her sister. So my next point is my grandparents. Both have passed away. Grandpa Fritz passed away when I was 3, and my grandmother Charlotte passed away about 2 years ago. But that is the direction. So it's coming from one of the sides. So I wondered, what should I do now? And luckily, that rectangle that's blinking over there on the right, this is my cousin Effie. And she tested her DNA. Effie is the daughter of my grandmother's sister, is the granddaughter of my grandmother's sister. So if Effie will match Edie, I can decide which path to take. Should I take Grandpa Fritz or should I take Grandma Charlotte? So I took Effie and I went to the chromosome browser. And Effie and Edie and me are not sure and don't have any triangulated segments. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not from that side of the family, because it could have been just lost on the way, those segments. But given that I don't have anything else to work with, I'm for now going to assume that it's not Effie, therefore not her mom, not her grandmother, not my grandparents from my grandmother's side. So I'm left with Grandpa Fritz. And this is the direction I'm going to pursue now. All right. So Grandpa Fritz had parents, which I obviously didn't know, Solomon and Clara, and that's the direction I should pursue next. It's coming from one of their sides. But who should I look for? And I decided we were more familiar with the Bloom last name. We are more in touch with that side of the family. And we didn't know much about Clara's family at all. We just knew that there were parents, Benjamin and Chati Rosenstein. And we decided to try and go that route and see whether Benji and Chati can tell me something. So I started an email thread with my aunt Iris. She's my co-genealogist in the family. And this is what she wrote to me on Monday, the day after I got my DNA match. It's in Hebrew at the top. I translated to English. Ran, I was probably right. She's usually right. I visited Edie's Facebook page. I went to her Facebook page and I looked at her connections, her friends. That information is usually public, FYI. And I saw a lot of Rosensteins. The Rosensteins, obviously not Chati and Benji Rosenstein, who passed away about 150 years ago. And this is the lost family from your great-grandmother Clara, Iris. So that was cool. So we knew we were in the right direction. And we kept on going. And that's an email an hour later. Ran. I spoke with Nogat, she's my mother. Great-grandmother's Clara first cousin moved to the USA before World War II. That's why there are 4 generations in America. Your mother is looking for grandpa's list from before my wedding. All right. So that was a family effort. So we're living in Israel. My aunt is living in San Diego. So she was looking in her archives and my mom was looking in her archives. And we opened tons of boxes. And we found the only picture that we have of Benji and Chati. They're on the right. And my great-grandma Clara. Cool. And we found the wedding invitees from 44 years ago written in the handwriting of my grandpa Fritz, who invited people for my Aunt Iris' wedding. And on the 4th line, it said, in the list, Mr. and Mrs. David L. Rosenstein from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, USA. No family that I know of in South Dakota, but there's a Rosenstein. So I went back to MyHeritage, and I went for a super search, and I was looking for David L. Rosenstein, that mysterious, and I found a record. And in the record, there was a grave. And I opened the grave. And on the grave, at the bottom, it says, 1 soul in 2 bodies, our children, Edith, Dorothy, Lau, and Laurie. Okay, so Edith and Edie. That's interesting. So I looked online, and I found his obituary. And I read his obituary, and it was a great man, by what people spoke about him. And I highlighted the things that already kind of, ran, like, things I put aside. I see Bulgaria, I have roots in Bulgaria, especially from Fritz's side. Sioux Falls that I've already seen. And the obituary is closed with grateful for having shared his life are his wife Leah of Sioux Falls and his children, Edie Julik and her husband Michael. And we found Edie. Edie is teaching hula dances in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And we reached out and we started the discussion, and it was great, really great. And we were able to learn that my great-grandma Clara has a brother. She didn't talk about him much. Fritz knew about her, but he also didn't talk about it much. And there was a whole line of people that we figured out and learned about and got in touch with. And on April 2018, my Aunt Iris went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and met with her second cousin, who's my second cousin once removed, Edie. Thank you.